Part 77. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 761. Chapter 761 Sutra Pavilion. She happened to take advantage of this time and hurriedly prepared a gift for Caillou in the space. After getting ready, Yuan placed the storage space on the table and prepared to let her grandpa give it to her grandma. It can also be regarded as creating an opportunity for grandpa to get close to grandma. Yun Xiao was in deep pain and couldn't extricate himself. He never thought that the Taoist companion who had been with him for 10,000 years was not what she wanted. He struggled to survive just because he wanted to rescue Caillou. What happened and the outcome was like this. How could he feel so embarrassed? Seeing her grandfather's expression, Yuan shook her head and sighed in her heart, thinking to herself, why is this so hard, torturing each other? Why would they have done it in the first place if they had known it would happen today? As for family marriage, you can also explain the reasons, whether it is a marriage or not, or a replacement. Anyway, it is a marriage that involves marriage first and love later. Why can't it be replaced by someone acceptable to both parties? When Ming Xiao came back to his senses, he looked very listless, and Yuan had no choice but to persuade him, Grandpa, actually you don't have to be so sad. If you think Grandma is willing to tell me this, it means that she has figured it out and wants to talk to me. Grandpa, please make peace, and I'm just passing on a message in the middle. Ming Xiao calmed down and asked Yuan seriously, is this really the case? Yuan admired her grandpa for calming down so quickly. He was indeed a skilled person, imprisoned in Ming-Ao space for hundreds of thousands of years. There was no need to describe her state of mind. She said, otherwise, what do you think Grandpa would have done? Grandma doesn't have to give me anything when I said this, I just went to Ming-Ao directly. Grandma was still willing to tell me this. Could it be that Grandpa still doesn't understand what Grandma meant? Whether Caillou meant this at the beginning or not, this is what she means now. It's just that her stupid Grandpa can't understand it yet, and he is still entangled in the fact that Grandma doesn't want him. It's just that the relationship between a man and a woman is very wonderful. If you say it doesn't exist, it will disappear. Grandma was worried about Ming-Ao before. This shows that there is no emotion at all. It really comes and goes in a hurry. Grandpa and Grandma are just the same, but if they develop their relationship, it may not be possible. Yuan snickered a few times in her heart and then looked at Ming Xiao. Sure enough, as soon as Yuan finished speaking, Ming Xiao put away her sad mood and said, are you saying that your grandma is still willing to live with Grandpa? Yuan nodded. Grandma really means this, so Grandpa, keep up the good work. Ming Xiao stood up fiercely, turned around and was about to leave. Yuan held her forehead. Grandpa was really impatient. She took the space ring on the table and chased after him. Grandpa, give this to Grandma. This is the gift I prepared for Grandma. After speaking, she winked at Ming Xiao. Ming Xiao took the ring and nodded her forehead. Ghost spirit, Grandpa will be rewarded when the job is done. Yuan pushed him, Grandpa, go quickly and take down Grandma in one fell swoop. Maybe we can even give birth to an uncle. You girl can say any nonsense, Ming Xiao scolded her, but he liked hearing this. He took the space ring and walked happily towards Caillou's bedroom. Yuan stuck out her tongue at him from behind, hoping that the enemies could reconcile. Otherwise, she, a little bee, would have to deal with it again. Yuan went to find Tianyan and the others again. Tianyan was very busy preparing for the ceremony to take over as the Lord God and had no time to pay attention to her, so she sat with Yao Ji for a while and then returned to her palace. It was quiet in the palace, and she was alone. Yuan was very bored, so she simply entered the space. The next day, Yuan came to the Sutra Pavilion. Looking at the huge Sutra Pavilion, Yuan could not help but smack her tongue. It was so high that at first glance, it seemed to be dozens of stories high. Yuan sacrificed the token, and the token immediately flew towards the Sutra Pavilion. When the token hit the barrier of the Sutra Pavilion, a light door opened in the boundary, and Yuan immediately accepted the token and stepped in. Wow, it's so big. As soon as he entered, Yuan thought that the huge space was a small world, and this was still the first floor. There are shelves arranged neatly in rows here. What is placed on them is not jade slips, but books in the mortal world. However, the material of these books is not ordinary paper, but made of the skin of mythical beasts. Even if it is left for billions of years, it will not break down. Yuan walked over and gently held the books with her hands. The books were arranged neatly and spotlessly. She picked up a book and flipped through it. The words in it were all in ancient Chinese, and Yuan could basically understand them. Teiku, ancient times, and ancient times. In fact, these characters are all very similar. Compared with the previous ones, the current characters are simpler and easier to recognize. The book Yuan took was a miscellaneous book that recorded interesting anecdotes about the monks' cultivation in ancient times. Although it didn't have anything as substantive as the exercises, it allowed Yuan to understand the grand practice of that time. Yuan then read it with great interest. Outside, the day came when Tianyan took over the position of Lord God. The couple sent countless messages to Yuan, but there was still no response from her. They thought she was in space and gave up sending any more messages. His grand ceremony went as scheduled, and with Mingxiao and the other three gods present, the grand ceremony went smoothly. Hence, the main of the Tianxia divine realm is Tianyan. The great elder of the Chu clan and the Mo patriarch of the Mo clan who came to celebrate today saw that it was Tianyan. One was surprised and the other was happy. Ancestor Mo regretted so much that he should not have listened to other people's instigation, so the Mo clan ended up like this. The Chu clan will rise again, the Mo clan will decline, and he can foresee that the Mo clan will be eliminated from the god realm. At this moment, Chu Mingfeng, Nanfan, and the great elder came to Tianyan. Young patriarch, no, it's Lord God. I congratulate Lord God. When the elder spoke, he was so excited that his tongue was tied. Tianyan smiled. From now on, Chu people, please pay more attention. From today on, Tianyan decided to let Chu Mingfeng and Nanfan live in the shrine instead of returning to the Chu tribe to work as cattle and horses for them. This is what it should be. The great elder was overjoyed. The Lord God was paying attention to him. After the big banquet, my parents will stay in the palace, and the Chu clan will be left in charge of the six of you. Ah, this. Son, don't be so fast. Chu Mingfeng came out and said. It's quick, we will take care of our grandson in the shrine from now on. Nanfan pulled him. Yes, that's true. The Chu clan is now stable. It doesn't matter whether I, the clan leader, am present or not. When you really need me, just send a message. Chu Mingfeng immediately left. If he doesn't agree, Nanfan will strangle him to death. As early as when she was a member of the Chu clan, Nanfan was ready. She was not going to go back when she came. She wanted to take care of her grandson. Great elder, he shouldn't have come. He came here but got a hard job, so the elder had to be happy to accept it. Tianyan saw that the elder was so righteous, so he did not embarrass him and took Chu Mingfeng and Nanfan to Mingxiao and his wife. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 762. Chapter 762. Suzaku. Unconsciously, Yuan has been here for 1,000 years. It took her 1,000 years to read all the books on the first floor. There are so many. Even though she read the book as fast as flipping through a book, it still took her 1,000 years. Oops, it's Dad's succession ceremony. Yuan patted her head, and then she remembered. She took out the sound transmission jade and looked at it. Sure enough, there were dozens of sound transmission jade. Yuan was very upset, but it had already passed. There was no use for her to go out now, so she had to send a message to Tianyan. Tell them that she is in the Sutra Pavilion. After the sound transmission was finished, Yuan sat on the ground to take a rest. She took a look here and saw that none of the books on the first floor were about exercises. They were all about humanities, geography, and interesting humanities. After she finished reading, she could form the cultivation practice in ancient times in her mind. The picture of the flourishing world. Yuan couldn't help but sigh. The current world of cultivation is completely different from the previous world. There are no rich powers, no treasures everywhere, and not many great powers. At that time, there were as many great powers as dogs. They were so powerful that they could tear apart space and step into the starry sky with their bare hands. You can also travel freely in the starry sky, and planets can also communicate with each other. Everyone can talk and discuss as much as they want. Nowadays, there is a shortage of cultivation resources, and it is difficult for everyone to advance. In order to obtain a few cultivation resources, they will spend a lot of money, use conspiracy, deception, etc., and there are endless means. There is no civilized cultivation, and some evil cultivators and demonic cultivators harm the cultivation world just for the sake of cultivation. There are no heartwarming love stories like those in books. There are powerful marriages like grandparents, and Ming Ao and Tian Ya, who are unscrupulous in kidnapping women. It turns out that in ancient times, the cultivation world at that time was very harmonious. There was no fighting, let alone murder and treasure grabbing. There were very few people who used unscrupulous means. Harmonious and civilized. At that time, people could form Taoist couples freely, and there was no such thing as family marriage. At that time, it could be said that there was a surplus of resources. Fan did not need to use his children to marry to maintain the family and protect the family's cultivation resources. To be honest, Yuan envied such a world. Unfortunately, such a world no longer exists. Yuan was just envious, her space would be like that in the future. When it was almost time to rest, Yuan went up to the second floor. There are books and jade slips on the second floor, but the area on this floor is half smaller than that on the first floor, but it is not small, it is over 10,000 square meters. Of course space formations are used here. So Yuan started reading on the second level again. The books on the second level contain exercises, supporting techniques, etc., but most of them are for beginners. Yuan has not given up reading. These are very suitable for her to read. The cultivation of their group has been explored by themselves from beginning to end. There is no one to teach them. These books are like systematic teaching, which has benefited Yuan a lot. Unknowingly, another 1,000 years have passed, and Yuan has reached the third level. Most of the third level books are books on training for tens of billions. These books are the same as those on the second level. They are also basic knowledge. For Yuan, said it was very useful. The various arts of cultivation here include not only written explanations, but also video explanations, which are all left by predecessors. Just like a teacher explaining to you, starting from the beginning, from the shallower to the deeper, very professional explanation. The jade slips placed next to the books contain real-life video explanations. The explanations are very detailed. Every time Yuan reads a jade slip, she feels suddenly enlightened. In this way, Yuan reads tirelessly and voraciously. In the Divine Tower, Mujukan has reached the 9th floor. He has been here for more than 10,000 years and finally reached the 9th floor, which means that his cultivation has reached the level of the God Emperor. Such a speed of cultivation is really surprising. Actually, he didn't know why, but the speed of cultivation in the Divine Tower was extremely fast. It would take others 10,000 years to reach a small level. And it took him more than 10,000 years to go from a little god man to a god emperor. This speed is simply impossible. But I don't want to believe it anymore, but this is the fact. Mujukin took a deep breath. He didn't know what would happen on this 9th level. There were all kinds of tests in the previous levels. Getting to this 9th level was a close call. He slowly walked toward the middle. Suddenly, the ground suddenly shook. He immediately stabilized his body and stopped moving forward, waiting for the shaking to pass. The shaking did not stop. Suddenly, a door of light appeared on the ground in the middle. Mujukin bit his lip and watched warily. When the light door was completely formed, the shaking stopped. Mujukin cautiously walked towards the light door and stood in front of it for a while. It seemed to be a teleportation light gate, but it was different from the teleportation array below, which meant that it was not teleporting outside the tower. Mujukin couldn't figure out why a portal appeared. After looking at it for a while, the light door was still there, so he gently stretched his hand into the light door. Suddenly, a suction force came to him, and the suction force instantly enveloped his whole body. Moreover, the suction force was so strong that he did not even have the strength to retreat, and was then teleported away. When he opened his eyes again, he found that he was in a closed space, and this space was filled with Nanming Liwo. Mujukin was extremely surprised. He only had a small piece of Nanming Liwo, but there were all of them here, still burning in this space. But the fire did not burn him. Instead, he was very close to him and surrounded him, seeming to welcome him. Just when Mujukin felt surprised, the Nanmingli fire in his dantian flew out on its own, and started flying wildly together with the fire. Seeing this scene, Mujukin was stunned on the spot. What is going on? Suddenly, in the middle of the fire, Mujukin felt the fluctuation of divine power. He immediately raised his spiritual eyes to look. In the middle, a huge Suzaku was floating. The huge Suzaku is moving, and his body is slowly shrinking. Mujukin was even more horrified because he felt the powerful aura coming from the Suzaku. He could only stand there and dare not move. He wanted to leave here but had no way to do so. The Suzaku was still getting smaller, until it stopped at the size of a human. However, his shape was no longer Suzaku, but a person wearing fiery red clothes. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Mujukin, who was standing aside. He came to Mujukin in the blink of an eye and looked at him steadily. A moment later, "My child, are you a descendant of the Suzaku clan?" the man of God asked him. Mujukin nodded. At this time, he could not feel the powerful aura from this god-man, but a very kind and familiar feeling. The god's eyes immediately became kind. Seeing Mujukin's cultivation, he was very satisfied. He nodded repeatedly. It's rare for the Suzaku clan to have such outstanding descendants. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 763. Chapter 763 Demon Suppression Tower. Mujukin glanced at the space. Are you the Suzaku ancestor? Why are you in the Divine Tower? Mujukin not only felt the terrifying aura in this godly man, but also couldn't see through his cultivation level. He is already in the realm of the God Emperor, but he cannot see through the cultivation level of the in front of him, which means that there is no one who is stronger than him. Such a person should not exist in this era. Mujukin only asked this question based on the origin of this sacred tower. The man of God nodded and said, "Yes, I am indeed the ancestor of the Suzaku clan. This divine tower is my ancestor's artifact, called the Demon Suppressing Tower." Demon Suppression Tower, Mujukin was surprised. The Demon Suppression Tower, as its name suggests, is for suppressing demons. Could it be that there are terrible monsters suppressed down here? Well, didn't you see that there are many divine beasts on each floor? In the past, These were monster beasts that didn't know how to practice. They were causing harm everywhere, so I caught them and threw them here. This divine tower is actually on the 11th floor. There is another floor below the first floor, which can only be reached by teleporting down from the 10th floor, where the ancestor of all demons is imprisoned. The ancestor of all monsters, Mujukin swallowed. The divine beasts in this tower were all extremely powerful. Isn't the ancestor of all monsters as strong as the Suzaku ancestor? Seeing his scared look, the Suzaku patriarch said, "Don't be afraid, the ancestor of 10,000 demons can't leave here. He is now the same as me, both have divine soul bodies, and can only survive in this demon suppression tower. The spirit will dissipate after you leave." Mujukin was a little confused when he heard it. The soul body can also be cultivated into a physical body, and the soul can also walk and survive outside at will. Why can't they? And why can't he see that the Suzaku ancestor is a divine soul? Ancestor, you said you are a soul body, what about your true body? My ancestor's true body must have perished with that of the ancestor of all monsters. If you guys can't see that this ancestor is a divine soul body, that's because you are not strong enough. This ancestor is the first divine beast. Do you understand the first divine beast? Mujukin nodded. This ancestor is the first Suzaku divine beast in the world. The reason why we are strong is not because we practice like you, but because since our birth, as long as I absorb the divine power of heaven and earth, our strength will naturally become stronger. It is powerful without any realm. Mujukin nodded. It turned out to be like this. Then the light door outside was brought here specially by the ancestor, or does it mean that everyone who comes after reaching the 9th level will see this light door, then he was teleported here, and then the souls of these people became his food? Ancestor Suzaku suddenly flashed a gleam in his eyes, and he smiled and said, "What are you thinking, kid? This demon-suppressing tower is my ancestral artifact. I still need the souls of those monks. Izuo would not do such an immoral thing." Oh. Mujukin was still wary of this ancestor. The ancestor never said why he came here. It was impossible to just tell him this, right? This ancestor must have some other purpose. He thought carefully about every word the ancestor said, and he was shocked. Could it be that he was the purpose? Institution. Ancestor Suzaku seemed to see through his mind and knocked on his head. "What are you thinking in your mind, kid? Do you think ancestor wants to take away your body? With your human animal body, I am Zio still doesn't like it? Then you, the old man, didn't ask the boy to come over and chat with you, right? You are really smart. Ancestor, I have been here for so long and I have never met anyone from the Suzaku clan. I saw you coming up. Can't we have a chat?" "Just chat, Muju, why don't you believe it? Of course it's more than just chatting. Otherwise, if you think your boy can be promoted so quickly in such a short period of time, there must be something for you to do. But before that, the ancestor has to let your bloodline evolve. Evolve into pure Suzaku bloodline. Meaning to turn it into a real bird?" Thinking that he had turned into a bird, Mujukin felt bad. Wanner would definitely dislike him. He immediately waved his hands and said, "Ancestor, there's no need for this. I turned into a bird. My wife, you will dislike me later." Being turned into a bird was not only something he couldn't accept, Wanner couldn't accept it even more. He is still human, but he has a little bit of Suzaku blood. He is still thinking about how to get rid of his Suzaku blood. This ancestor also wants to turn him into a pure bird. The ancestor knocked on his head again and said, "It's worthless. Our Suzaku clan is nobler than that human bloodline. I don't know where it is. We still dislike it. Why do we dislike it? After helping you evolve your bloodline, you can become the Suzaku body and fight. At that time, the combat power was very powerful, not comparable to that of human monks. Moreover, your cultivation level will not be limited in the future, and you will not only cultivate to the realm of the God Emperor like humans. If you don't have such benefits, why would you want to protect yourself? Isn't your wife better? Mujukin didn't say anything after hearing this. Anyway, he felt that it was not a good thing for him. Seeing that he remained silent, the ancestor asked again, "There are 2 children of our Suzaku bloodline in the demon suppression tower. Are they your sons?" Mujukin nodded, "Those are our twin sons." "Well, the qualifications of those 2 boys are also good, but they are still a little worse than you. Do you want me to help them improve?" Mujukin shook his head, "Thank you, ancestor, they don't need it. They have very little Suzaku blood." "Well, what about the other tribesmen, what are their qualifications? By the way, has something happened to the outside world? This ancestor has not seen a person of Suzaku blood come in for so many years." "Well, in the Wushu divine realm, we are probably the only 3 people with Suzaku bloodline." "Oh? Why, the Suzaku clan and the Dragon clan are both big clans, so why are there only 3 of them, father and son?" The ancestor thought deeply, no wonder he couldn't see anyone with Suzaku blood coming in. Mujukin told the story about the curse that the patriarch of the Tiandao sect placed on the Suzaku clan. "You said it was human monks who cast a spell on the Suzaku family." Mujukin rolled his eyes at him. "Didn't he make it clear enough?" "Yes, I only succeeded in breaking through the curse seal when I was on the first level of transcending the tribulation. These human monks, if I could go out and kill them, I would kill every one of them. I would wipe out all of them, leaving no one alive. They dare to cast a curse on our Suzaku clan." The ancestor was furious after hearing this, and flames appeared on his body. Mujukin was so frightened that he took a few steps back. His ancestor's Nanming Liwo was very powerful, and he didn't want to suffer the same fate as Chiu. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 764. Chapter 764 The Death of Mujukin. When the ancestor saw that Mujukin was frightened, he immediately put away the flame, and also put all the flames in the space into his body, leaving only Mujukin's small flame. The ancestor looked at the small flame and despised it. How could it be such a big flame? He raised his hand and flicked towards the small flame. A flame as big as a fist flew towards the small flame, and the 2 flames merged instantly. Mujukin was about to take back the flame, but he was a step too late. However, after seeing that the 2 flames merged, the contract between him and Nanming Liwo was not eliminated. And Nanming Liwo has been promoted from a junior divine fire to a high-level divine fire. "Thank you, ancestor." Mujukin was very happy. He bowed to his ancestor and immediately put Nanming Liwo into his danshin. I secretly sighed that this ancestor was so powerful, so he gave a small amount of fire to Nanming Liwo, and it became a high-level divine fire. Thinking about the divine fire in this space, I don't know how high its level is. Are you envious of this little magical skill? You are not willing to let me evolve after evolution, you can reach the strength of my ancestor. The hand shown by Suzaku ancestor really made Mujukin envious. Who doesn't want to be powerful, but he still asked clearly, what if he couldn't do it? So he asked, "Ancestor, after you let the kid evolve his bloodline, what exactly should be done?" "After evolution, of course I will let you be the master of the demon suppressing tower, and then leave here with the demon suppressing tower." "Ancestor, this is your sacred weapon, can you give it to the boy?" Mujukin deeply suspected that there was something wrong with this ancestor, and it must not be a good thing for him. Mujukin always felt that this matter was very suspenseful and that something was wrong. But he couldn't tell what was wrong. He looked at everything with his eyes and found nothing wrong. "Ha ha ha, I will give it to you if my ancestor says it will be given to you. What are you afraid of? Come on, come here and let me give it to you." The ancestor said and waved to him. Mujukin heard this devilish laughter and walked towards the Suzaku ancestor uncontrollably. Mujukin was startled, but his steps didn't seem to obey his orders. But the ancestor walked toward him with a loving face, stopped in front of him, stretched out his hand to touch his face. "You are such a vigilant kid. If it weren't for your powerful soul, why would I have to waste all this time? Kung Fu, I almost can't do anything to you." Mujukin thought that he was finished, and he felt something was wrong. Sure enough, he fell into the old man's trap. At this time, his soul had been imprisoned, and he couldn't enter the space even if he wanted to. It turned out that while he was relaxing, the Suzaku ancestor had already imprisoned his soul without him realizing it. "You know what to post next without even thinking about it?" The ancestor patted him again and said, "Don't be afraid, don't worry, you will be the same from now on, and the ancestor will be the ancestor." Mujukin closed his eyes. He was still glad in his heart. Fortunately, his qualifications were better than Liang Bao. Otherwise, the ancestor would definitely get Liang Bao, and the consequences would be disastrous. As for him, is he so easy to seize? He opened his eyes and stared at the Suzaku ancestor fiercely and said, "The ancestor really took great pains to seduce me with the Suzaku bloodline. I hope the ancestor will be merciful." The ancestor smiled lovingly at him again. "Of course, the ancestor will leave a trace of your soul. You can rebuild your soul if you have the opportunity in the future, but you have to borrow your body. You already know the reason." Mujukin nodded resignedly, then closed his eyes, and his consciousness sank into the sea of consciousness. As soon as he returned to the sea of consciousness, the Suzaku ancestor followed him into the sea of consciousness. After he entered, he bit his soul without saying a word. "He," Mujukin sneered. The moment the ancestor bit his soul, he immediately sent out 10 soul thorns. Those 10 shining soul thorns surrounded the ancestor's soul and attacked his soul instantly. "Ah!" Ancestor Suzaku screamed, and at the same time, Mujukin's spirit bit into the ancestor's spirit, biting off a large piece of his body. "Ah!" The ancestor screamed again. "Well, you stinky boy, it turns out you still have this skill. Let's see how I can kill you. It's a pity that this guy's soul attack is not strong enough, otherwise he would have capsized in the gutter." As he spoke, the ancestor's soul flashed, and flames suddenly appeared all over his body, and then he attacked Mujukin's soul. Now he would not devour his soul, he would destroy his soul. When Mujukin saw the flames and knew that he was no match for Nanming Liwo, he immediately ran away like crazy. The ancestor was also chasing after him crazily, his flames flying towards Mujukin like a rocket. The sea of consciousness is so big, and soon Mujukin's sea of consciousness turned into a sea of fire, with Nanmingli fire burning everywhere. Mujukin's sea of consciousness could not withstand his ancestor's Nanming Liwo. Soon, some parts of Mujukin's sea of consciousness began to collapse. In an instant, his brain was in pain. His pain caused his escape speed to slow down significantly. The ancestor who followed him waved his hand and surrounded Mujukin with a ball of flame. "Ah!" This time it was Mujukin who screamed, and the Nanmingli fire burned around him, and in the blink of an eye he became a burning man. Not long after, the spirit shrank in size. "Ha ha ha, fight with me, let's see how you die." The ancestor laughed heartily. It was too young for a junior to fight with him. After he finished laughing, he waved his hand to put away Nanming Liwo. He needed this body, and he had to spend time to heal when his consciousness was injured. The ball of Nanmingli fire that burned Mujukin was left behind. When he saw that Mujukin had lost the ability to resist, he took away Nanming Liwo, and then swallowed Mujukin in one gulp, leaving not a trace of his soul behind. At the same time, Liang Bao, who was on the 3rd floor, suddenly opened his mouth and spit out a mouthful of blood, and then his heart felt like a knife. The two treasures immediately stopped fighting and ducked into the space. Yuan in the Tiandao Sex Scripture Collection Pavilion, like the two treasures, entered the space holding her chest and came to the place where the soul tablet was placed on the top floor of the treasure storage pavilion. With a sweep of her consciousness, Mujukin's soul tablet was next to her soul tablet. It was already broken, and there was only a wisp of soul floating there. Mujukin, Yuan cried out in pain, and with a wave of her hand, she quickly moved Mujukin's soul to the soul mountain. He quickly collected the divine soul flower and the Ningxuan flower, refined it into a medicinal solution, and then gave the medicinal solution to Mujukin's divine soul to absorb. After all the liquid medicine was absorbed, Mujukin's soul had formed into a human-sized soul body, but it was not solid enough and he needed to absorb the soul power himself to practice. At this moment, Yuan sat blankly next to Mujukin's soul, tears streaming down her face, and Mujukin fell into the pagoda. Thinking of the divine tower, Yuan wiped away her tears, and she immediately controlled the gate to the divine tower. But when she arrived at the tower square, the square was densely packed with people, and the tower towering in the square had disappeared. "What's going on?" Yuan grabbed a still somewhat confused god and asked. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 765. Chapter 765 Searching. The man of God came to his senses when he saw that a goddess had caught him. He tried to shake off Yuan but failed. He had no choice but to say, "We don't know what happened to this goddess. We are in the tower I was practicing here, but I was inexplicably thrown out of the divine tower, and then, the divine tower disappeared." After Yuan heard this, the disappearance of the sacred tower must be related to Mujukin's fall. So she returned to the space again and looked for the two treasures in the world gate. The two treasures were also thrown out. At that time, the brothers were healing in their space. "Mom, what's wrong with you?" Liangbao asked Yuan immediately when she saw that she looked very bad. "Mother's eyes are red, something must have happened." "Didn't you meet your father in the tower?" Yuan asked with choked sobs. Liangbao shook his head, "No." Suddenly, Dabao's face changed. Thinking of the sudden and inexplicable vomiting of blood in the tower, he asked in horror, "Mom, something happened to Dad?" Yuan nodded, covered her face and cried bitterly. As soon as the two treasures saw each other, they quickly ran to the place where the soul tablet was placed. As expected, a small pile of broken jade was scattered where the Mujukin soul tablet was placed. "Brother, let's go to Soul Mountain." Erbao took up the big treasure and went to Soul Mountain. When he looked for it, he saw Mujukin's weak soul body floating in the air. "Dad," the two babies were like deflated rubber balls, slumped to the ground. After a while, Dabao stood up and helped Erbao up. "Let's go see mother." When something happens to their father, their mother is the most saddened. Erbao nodded. The brothers came to the small garden, and Yuan was still sitting on the ground, crying so hard that she almost fainted. Mother Dabao flew over and picked her up, flew to the palace, and put her on the bed. The two brothers stood guard in front of the bed. Yuan cried so hard that she felt so regretful that she wanted to separate from him. At this time, in a city in the eastern god territory, the Suzaku ancestor was wandering around the city. Looking at the current god realm, he shook his head. His divine power was so thin, and other powers were even more pitiful. It turns out that when the Suzaku ancestor saw that Mujukin still had some soul left, he devoured Mujukin. After devouring him, he got half of his memory. There are only memories before becoming an immortal, and the memories after that were burned away by the Nanming Liwo. So he could only rely on his own memory to come to the city, hoping to run into Yuan. He thought that their sons were all in the god realm, and Yuan should also be in the god realm. He was looking for Yuan mainly because he wanted to get Yuan's space. From Mujukin's memory, he learned that she had an artifact life space. It seemed that the level of that space was not low. If you get it and use it to fuse it with his divine tower, then his divine tower will definitely be upgraded. Moreover, he got Mujukin's body and was eager to see Yuan. Yuan slept in the space for a long time before waking up. Mother Liangbao immediately helped her up. Seeing her two sons reminded Yuan of Mujukin again. She touched the two treasures and said, "Mom is fine. Can you two tell me what happened in the pagoda?" After saying that, Yuan rubbed her swollen temples. Looking at the two faces similar to Mujukin, she felt even more uncomfortable. Although Mujukin would not die, she still could not accept the fact that Mujukin's main soul died. Dabao said, "Mom, we don't know what happened. The two of us were fighting with a mythical beast that day. Suddenly, we felt so uncomfortable that it felt like our hearts were being torn out. Then we both spit out a mouthful of blood at the same time, as if we were being ripped out. It was like a serious injury. After that, we entered the space to heal, and then we were thrown out of the tower. The whole process was like this. What we were worried about at the time was that something happened to our mother and father, otherwise we would not have reacted like that. Unexpectedly, we still reacted like that. Something happened to my father." After Dabao finished speaking, he lowered his head and felt very sad. "I think your father must have been very sad at that time. Only we, mother and son, had that feeling. Your father's death must be related to the tower. You should not go out for the time being and stay in the space." Thinking of Mujukin's despair at that time, Yuan's heart felt like a knife piercing her heart. As for Liangbao letting them stay in the space, Yuan felt that it would be safer for them to stay in the space before they figured out the matter about the tower. Liangbao nodded. "Then you go to the Soul Mountain to practice while watching your father, and leave your mother alone for a while." Liangbao nodded again, glanced at Yuan worriedly, and then went to Han Mountain. After the two treasures left, Yuan closed the palace door and sat on the bed alone, thinking about things. She must find out what happened and cannot let Mujukin die in vain. Although this ray of soul can be cultivated to the state when he died and has all the memories, it will take a long, long time. She couldn't wait until that time, so she had to figure it out now. No matter who it was, she would definitely avenge her. If she wanted to find out, she had to search around the Divine Tower, but now she knew nothing about the Divine Tower and could not find it. The God Tower is actually the same as her space. It is an independent space. The God Tower can be said to be another world of cultivation. But it must be controlled by someone, otherwise it would not disappear inexplicably. Moreover, the altar has been there since ancient times and there has never been any special situation. That is, there is only one possibility. The person who controls it must be healing there. After so many years of training with so many gods and men, and spending so many sacred stones, it must be healing. Whether he is absorbing divine power or entering the soul of a fallen god, he is healing. Unfortunately, Mujukin encountered an accident. After his death, the soul fed him. Yuan had asked Jimin to look for Mujukin before, but he had indeed disappeared from the god realm without leaving a trace of his soul. If it weren't for the trace of soul left in the space, Mujukin would have completely fallen. It was difficult to find the god pagoda. During the past 10,000 years, she had seen the 11th floor of the scripture pavilion, but she had not found a single word about the god pagoda. Even though there were no clues, Yuan did not give up searching. She decided to try her luck in the god realm. Yuan immediately left the Tiandao section. She originally wanted to see her parents and younger brother before leaving. She also wanted to see what the little Chuling had grown up to be now. But in her current condition, it is better not to appear in front of her parents. So Yuan only left a message for them, saying that there was an emergency and they had to leave Tiandao sect. Of course Tianyan and the others would not have thought about Mujukin's death. They thought that Yuan was curious about the disappearance of the Divine Tower and wanted to see what was going on in the Divine Tower, so they didn't take it to heart and only told her to pay more attention. Just be safe and err on the side of caution. Yuan left Tiandao sect and randomly chose a city to enter. In the city, people everywhere are talking about the sudden disappearance of the sacred tower. Yuan found a tea house, ordered a pot of tea, and sat quietly listening to people talking about the pagoda. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 766. Chapter 766 Meeting. Hey, why did the sacred tower suddenly disappear? We won't be able to practice it in the future. There were two people sitting behind Yuan talking about this matter. The green-robed said, I don't know. All the people in the divine tower were teleported out at that time. No one knew what happened. Think about it, this divine tower has not been touched for how long it has been here, and it has not been moved since ancient times. It is still unknown how long the divine tower has been here. Everyone speculates that either the weapon spirit of the divine tower is injured and healing here, or the owner of the divine tower is healing here. No, once the injury is healed, the divine tower will naturally leave. The in blue nodded and said regretfully, everyone thinks so, except that it really doesn't make sense. It's just that there will be no good place to practice in the future. It's a pity. It's nothing to be sorry for if this is the case, the tower will have to go sooner or later. Indeed. Yuan listened to what the two said, and it was pretty much what she guessed. She used her consciousness to listen to what others said. Everyone's opinions were roughly the same. We are all people who own artifacts. This is the only way to explain the sudden disappearance of such artifacts. Yuan thought so too, but she thought a little deeper. Anyone who could possess an artifact like the God Tower must have reached a terrifying level of cultivation. It was very possible for him to tear apart the space with his bare hands and walk away. So it is simply impossible to find the divine tower. Even if it was impossible, Yuan decided to try her luck in the God realm, and she would not let it go even in the Wuxia God realm. So Yuan paid the bill and left the tea house, then wandered around the city for a while, then left the city, and then walked around in the God realm. Yuan was searching aimlessly in the God realm, and the Suzaku ancestor on the other side was also searching for her aimlessly. Of course he also heard people everywhere in the God realm talking about the disappearance of the divine tower. When he heard people saying that the disappearance of the sacred tower was due to the awakening of the weapon spirit, or that the owner of the sacred tower disappeared with the sacred tower, he suddenly thought of a way to lure Yuan out. Or bring their two sons out. No matter who they bring out, he can see Yuan. That is the appearance of the divine tower. When Yuan and her son hear the appearance of the divine tower, they will definitely come. Mujukin's memory told him that with Yuan's temperament, it was impossible for her Taoist companion to die in such an unexplained way and remain indifferent. She would definitely find the divine tower and take revenge. I have to say that the Suzaku ancestor is very smart at the moment. Everything is as he guessed. Yuan is looking for the God Tower everywhere. Ancestor Suzaku felt happy in his heart. He didn't know why, but he was particularly excited at the thought of meeting Yuan. His return to this body is originally from Mujukin, and it is a natural reaction of the body. He has checked it countless times, and there is no trace of Mujukin's soul in this body. Even the breath is his, not Mujukin's. So Ancestor Suzaku chose a relatively remote place, but where the gods could see it, and he immediately revealed the main body of the divine tower. God Tower, look, that's the God Tower. As soon as he appeared, I discovered him. Ah, it's really a sacred tower that has disappeared for almost a year. Why is it here? Let's go and take a look. The appearance of the divine tower immediately attracted the surrounding monks to watch. Everyone thought of the strangeness of the divine tower, but they only looked at it from a distance and did not go over it. Ancestor Suzaku saw the scene outside in the divine tower. He smiled. He did not believe that the news of the appearance of the divine tower had not reached the ears of Yuan, mother and son. Sure enough, the news of the reappearance of the divine tower spread throughout the god realm at a speed of 1 to 10 and 10 to 100. Yuan, who was looking around for the whereabouts of the sacred tower, suddenly heard the news and hurriedly followed the monks. The divine tower appeared in the western divine realm. When Yuan followed the gods and arrived, she saw the divine tower standing on the edge of the deserted desert. And the sacred tower was surrounded by a huge crowd of gods and men, but no one came close to the sacred tower. Yuan did not get close to the pagoda, and observed the pagoda from a distance. The inexplicable appearance of the sacred tower is definitely not an accident. She had a feeling that this sacred tower seemed to have lured her here on purpose. At this time, the Suzaku ancestor who was in the sacred tower saw Yuan in the crowd. The moment he saw Yuan, he almost ran out because he had the urge to go out and hold her in his arms. The Suzaku ancestor was very unhappy with this feeling. He knew that this was not his intention. He suppressed the throbbing and looked at Yuan with his consciousness. Sure enough, she is so handsome that she has the talent to impress people all over the world. Yuan, who was standing in the crowd, felt the divine consciousness sweeping over her body. She stood as if she didn't see it, but opened her divine eyes and followed the divine consciousness. Sure enough, that spiritual consciousness came out of the divine tower. It definitely did not belong to Mujukan. It was the owner of the divine tower or the artifact spirit of the divine tower. Yuan suppressed the sadness and anger in her heart. She quietly disappeared from the crowd and flew into the desert. She knew that her invisibility could not be hidden from the owner or the spirit of this sacred tower. The reason why she was brought here was just to see her. It just so happened that she also wanted to settle accounts with him. Since their purpose is the same, I believe that when she enters the desert, the sacred tower will definitely follow her soon. Ancestor Suzaku saw Yuan disappearing into the desert, and thought that this woman was really smart, so he immediately closed the sacred tower and teleported into the desert. The sacred tower disappeared again. As soon as the sacred tower disappeared, the surrounding gods became excited again. Everyone looked around and saw someone entering the desert, so they followed him. When the Suzaku ancestor arrived, he waved a barrier and said to Yuan, "Show up." Yuan appeared and turned around slowly, looking at the person wearing Mujukan's skin in front of her. The familiar face and the unfamiliar atmosphere made Yuan sad, and her tears couldn't stop flowing. She thought about many possibilities, but she never thought that it was the owner of the sacred tower who took away Mujukan. Why do you want to seize Mujukan? Why do so many people choose him? Yuan burst into tears and said bitterly. She really wanted to rush over and hug Mujukan, but it was no longer him. You little girl is quite smart. You should know why I brought you here. Seeing Yuan crying so sadly, the Suzaku ancestor said expressionlessly. My ancestor? Which ancestor are you? Yuan was stunned by the three words ancestor in his sentence. Which family's ancestor seizes Mujukan? She is simply crazy. Such a smart girl, can't you understand? Could it be that this ancestor is still your ancestor? Naturally, this ancestor is Mujukan's ancestor. Zuck ancestor looked at Yuan with a joking expression. Seeing what this girl would think, he was looking forward to it. Yuan really wanted to slap him to death. Are you the Suzaku ancestor? How is that possible? How can you take away your descendants? You are simply crazy. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 767. Chapter 767, Soul Split. Ancestor Suzaku was not angry at all. Seeing the furious Yuan, Ancestor Suzaku felt inexplicably excited and nodded towards her. What does it mean to be crazy, girl? This is because I think highly of him. Do you think I am just following him? you can take a fancy to a person's body casually. This body is very good, the red flame divine body. Haha girl, you are also good, the star divine body, this is rare in the god realm. Only then did ancestor Suzaku realize that the current cultivation world was in a state of depression. Even those special physiques that were common in ancient times were now very rare. Furthermore, in the past, some powerful ancestors with poor qualifications liked to find bodies with good qualifications among their descendants to seize, in order to achieve immortality. But no matter who you are, you can only seize your body once in this life. If you do it again, God will make your soul fly away. This is why he does not dare to be exposed to the ways of heaven and can only walk in other people's bodies. Fortunately, he does not have to go through the heavenly tribulation again, otherwise it will be the day of his death. Yuan took a deep breath. She was so angry at the shamelessness of the Suzaku ancestor. It turned out that the truth was so cruel. Her Mujukan died unjustly. She stared at the Suzaku ancestor, and she must take back Mujukan's body. Girl, I kindly remind you, don't think about revenge. You are no match for me. Don't lose your little life. For the sake of being a junior Taoist monk, you have given birth to 2 more for the Suzaku clan. For the sake of this junior, I will spare your life as long as you hand over your space. When ancestor Suzaku saw that Yuan was in a star body, he thought about it carefully. The space on Yuan's body was very similar to the star space refined by the god Emperor Xing Chen, the weapon refiner in the ancient times. The star god Emperor is also a star, and his name is also called a star. The star space he refined was originally refined for himself, but unexpectedly, the star space appeared in Yuan's place. He will definitely get such a treasure and let his demon suppressing tower devour it. The demon suppressing tower can also be upgraded, but there is no way for the 10,000 demon king who is suppressing it below to come up with it. Moreover, he wanted to know how could the old man, the star god emperor, have fallen like him. Humph, what a shameless statement. Yuan was furious, and with a flick of his consciousness, a large formation of stars was formed in one breath, trapping the Suzaku ancestor in the formation. Ancestor Suzaku glanced at the star formation with disdain. It was a pity that this formation was arranged by old ghost Xing Chen. He would be a little scared. Yuan didn't exist. Phew, ancestor Suzaku waved his hand, and 108 formation flags were caught in his hand. He smiled scornfully, you are lucky, you even got old ghost Xingchen's star Ju. It's a pity that this, no matter how powerful the star formation is, it is nothing but in front of this ancestor. Speaking, the Suzaku ancestor threw out 108 star flags, and instantly formed a formation to trap Yuan. The corner of his mouth raised, how? Look at your star formation. I set it up. Have you never seen a big formation? How do you feel when you see me using your artifact to set up the formation? What do you think? Kill my ancestor. Yuan stood there blankly. If the Suzaku ancestor had intended to kill her, she would have died long ago. She felt a chill in her heart. Wanting to take back Mujukan's body and take revenge was simply a dream. Look at the huge formation they had set up, it was something she had never seen before. Of course, this large formation cannot really trap her. After all, it is her magic weapon. As long as the formation flag is withdrawn. The hand they showed her was just to tell her not to play any tricks and to obediently give up her space. Yuan did not put away the formation flag immediately, but was looking at the formation, which looked very dangerous at first glance. Ancestor Suzaku was a little dissatisfied with his threat, so he added, doesn't it feel very powerless? So I won't force you, but you must hand over the star space. You have to know that even if you don't hand it over, I will ancestor can come and get it yourself. If you take it yourself, the process will not be beautiful. Yuan ignored him at all. She memorized the formation before she put away the formation flag, and then looked at Ancestor Suzaku. She said coldly, "I will not give my space to you, so you have given up on this idea. If you have the ability, just come and get it yourself. I also advise the Ancestor, it is best to return Mujukin's body, give it to me, otherwise you won't even be able to save your own soul." Who doesn't know how to say harsh words? I want to get her space and dream. When Yuan was speaking, she was already controlling the realm gate. This Suzaku Ancestor was too powerful and should not be taken lightly. Mujukin's body cannot be taken back today. Escape for your life first. Ha ha ha, interesting, this Ancestor has never seen such a arrogant junior Ancestor. Zuck looked up to the sky and laughed, looking at Yuan with interest. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. He really wanted to rob Yuan. After all, he is also a Taoist monk in this body. Suddenly, the face of the Suzaku Ancestor sank. With a wave of his hand, he immediately imprisoned Yuan. A golden light quickly shot into her sea of consciousness, and immediately bound her soul. This woman is too cunning, he has to strike first. Get the star space first, people can't escape. Yuan was shocked. The Suzaku Ancestor was so fast that she didn't even have a chance to enter the space. Her soul was trapped by the golden light, and she could not break away from it. Like a soul-binding rope, it tightly bound her soul. Be obedient and don't resist, otherwise it will hurt your soul. I just stripped the star space from your soul. I don't care about other things. Just when Yuan was struggling, the Suzaku Ancestor kindly tried to persuade her. Yuan looked at the Suzaku Ancestor coldly. She gave up struggling, her soul was imprisoned, and she couldn't even use the boundary gate. Sure enough, there are people outside the world. She has never suffered such a big loss, and it is also the first time she has met such a powerful person. Fortunately, the Suzaku Ancestor had no intention of killing her from the beginning to the end, otherwise she would have died several times. But even so, can he do anything to her? She won't be ready to meet him and still let him control her? Is she that stupid? As early as when Yuan saw that the Suzaku Patriarch was using Mujukin's body, she knew that the Suzaku Patriarch had taken Mujukin's body and had Mujukin's memories, and knew her very well. So she had already changed her soul when she came to the desert. The time when her soul was hurt, she had the idea at that time that if she had several clones, she would not be so passive and beaten when the main soul was hurt. So she divided a divine soul and placed it on the soul mountain, and then kept devouring the divine soul flower and the concentration flower for the clone, until the divine soul cultivated into her divided soul. But it is not a divine soul body. It is not that easy to cultivate to a divine soul body. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 768. Chapter 768 Uncontrollable. During the more than 10,000 years she has been in the Sutra Pavilion, her split soul has long been cultivated to be as powerful as her main soul. So the Suzaku Ancestor is just a clone of his divine soul. There is nothing in the cloned soul, and the Suzaku Ancestor can't get anything. She can also completely self-destruct this body. Just thinking that she would hurt Mujukin's body if she blew herself up, she was reluctant to blow herself up. Mujukin's body not only contains the artifact he contracted, but also a golden dragon. It's just that his soul was devoured by the Suzaku Ancestor, and the golden dragon is probably in danger. All the blood-eating demonic insects contracted by Mujukin in her space died, leaving only more than 300 of hers, so the golden dragon was not spared. Just when the Suzaku Ancestor began to search the space for Yuan's clone, Yuan's main soul controlled the realm gate and had already escaped. It's just that the body is still in the barrier of Ancestor Suzaku. At this time, the Suzaku Patriarch searched for a long time, but couldn't find anything in Yuan's soul. He was surprised. Is this a split soul? It took the Suzaku Ancestor a long time to react. This cunning woman ancestor Suzaku withdrew his consciousness and cursed in a low voice. At this moment, Yuan in the barrier also disappeared. The Suzaku ancestor was just stunned for a moment, not too surprised. However, his hand immediately hit a few magic spells, and the scene around him instantly changed, turning into a net with densely packed planets shining with starlight. His consciousness scanned these planets, but Yuan's space was nowhere to be seen. Heh, you are quite capable. I really underestimated you. I won't be so lucky next time I meet you. Ancestor Suzaku withdrew his consciousness and walked out of the desert. He knew that Yuan would not come to him again in a short time, so he would go to her. He is becoming more and more interested in Yuan. There is nothing to do in the God realm, so just have fun. Now that he is well, he does not need the divine stone. When needed, he can just collect the divine vein. If she can't be found, wouldn't it be better to look for her sons despite Mujukin's body? Then let's look for those two sons first. On the other side, Yuan breathed a long sigh of relief in the space. She thought that her body was going to be destroyed. Unexpectedly, the Suzaku ancestor found that there was nothing in the soul and actually released the soul. She must have taken the opportunity to take the body back. After Yuan's main soul returned to her body, she checked her body with her spiritual consciousness. When there was nothing unusual, she came to the Soul Mountain. Mother, when Liang Bao saw her coming, he immediately called her. Well, are you at all suspicious of your father's soul? Yes, I asked Dad to swallow some condensation flower liquid today, Dabao said. Well, that's good, just watch it, Mother, go and practice. Okay, Mom, go ahead, we will watch over Dad, Dabao said. Yuan glanced at Mujukin, who was still a shadow, hugged her two sons, and then she ducked into the training room. Her cultivation has been improved, and the strength of the gods is just scum in the eyes of the Suzaku ancestor. Before she retreated, she sent a message to Tianyan and the others, and she went to Dongsha realm. This time the cultivation level is promoted to overcome the thunder tribulation, and passing through the tribulation in Tianxia realm will definitely attract the Suzaku ancestor. After arriving at Dongsha realm, Yuan immediately retreated into seclusion. The ancestor of Suzaku in Tianxia realm searched for Yuan and her son for a long time, but could not find them at all, as if they had disappeared in Tianxia realm. Time passed like this day by day, and the Suzaku ancestor sometimes felt as if he could not control his own heart, as if he were Mujukin. Whenever he thought of Yuan, he missed her very much and wanted to find her. He regretted taking away Mujukin's body, but he couldn't live without it now. Unless he could find a better body than Mujukin's body, he would give up this body. As time went by, this feeling made him very annoyed. On this day, he came to a city. As soon as he entered the city, he was stopped by a person. When he saw it with his consciousness, it was the Feng family. In his memory, this was Yuan's mother in the mortal world. He couldn't avoid it even if he wanted to, so he had to bite the bullet and go up. He opened his mouth. Mother, why are you here? The Suzaku ancestor was so sick that he was dying of vomiting. He, a Suzaku who had lived for who knows how long, called a human woman his mother. If it were anyone else, he would have killed him with one palm, but he just didn't want to hurt Yuan's relatives. Mrs. Feng looked at the Suzaku ancestor, who looked unhappy, and said, Mom, you are here to exchange for some sacred stones. Why are you here alone? Where is Xiao Sier? You were also thrown out of the sacred tower and scattered. Ancestor Suzaku nodded, then get busy, I'll go find her. Feng's foxy eyes looked a little strange. Mujukin. Do you need to look for Xiao Sier? No matter where they are, it's Xiao Sier who is looking for them. They want to find her unless she is fixed somewhere. Well, let's leave here and come back together to see if we find it. Okay, Ancestor Suzaku nodded and immediately left the city. Ms. Feng looked a bit like the Suzaku ancestor who was running away. She shook her head and went back. Ancestor Suzaku teleported to a deserted place. He covered his increasingly uncontrollable heart and felt very annoyed. He used to want to find Yuan and the others, but now he just wants to hide. Ancestor Suzaku could only enter the demon suppression tower and come to the space where it was recovering from its injuries. The spirit came out of Mujukin's body. He checked Mujukin's body carefully, over and over again, not even a single hair was missed. He looked at them all carefully, and there was nothing abnormal. He even opened Mujukin's spiritual eyes and looked at it, but there was nothing unusual about it. Strangeness. Ancestor Suzaku couldn't understand why he could no longer control Mujukin's heart as soon as he entered Mujukin's body. Normally, the soul should be assimilated into Mujukin's body, but the opposite is true. If this continues, then he is Mujukin, not his Suzaku ancestor. After reading that there were no problems, the Suzaku ancestor immediately returned to Mujukin's body, sat cross-legged on the ground, and started his own skill Red Flame Ju. This is a technique that was specially created for the Red Flame body, not the technique that Mujukin practiced before. He must cultivate so that his soul and body are in harmony, and no more uncontrollable things will happen. While he was practicing, there was an invisible place deep in the sea of consciousness, and there was a thumb-sized person in it. If you look carefully, isn't it a miniature version of Mujukin? At this time, the little man's eyes were closed tightly, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. But if you look carefully, you can see that the soul power of the ancestor Suzaku was being sucked away by him. But the Suzaku ancestor knew nothing about it. Time flies, and 10,000 years have passed. In a deserted place in the Dongsha realm, Yuan was sitting with her eyes closed. She was smashed everywhere, and the power of thunder and lightning was emanating from all around. Obviously she had just passed through the thunder tribulation. As for Yuan, who was sitting among the ruins, her face was filled with pain, and she didn't know what she was going through. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 769. Chapter 769 Doubts. Wanner, please save me, why don't you save me? Just watch me die like this? Why have you become so cruel? Yuan looked coldly at the ferocious-faced Mujukin. Yuan just looked at him coldly. Where are you dead? Isn't this good? Mujukin would not say that to her even if he died, so she was not Mujukin at all. Yuan looked around with her consciousness. At first, she didn't know that this was an illusion, and she didn't know why she suddenly came here. This place was filled with the aura of Nanming Liwo. At first she believed him and really wanted to take him into the space. But suddenly an idea flashed through her mind, wasn't Mujukin taken away by Suzaku ancestor? Where did Mujukin come from? How could he save him? Why should he be saved? Only later did she realize that this was an illusion, so she didn't foolishly think it was Mujukin like before. She was reluctant to let go, she was entangled, otherwise she would have split the thing in front of her in Mujukin's skin with one palm. Yuan said coldly to Mujukin, you are not Mujukin at all. I don't know what you were transformed into. If you don't want to die, get out, otherwise don't blame me for being ruthless. Humph. I am Mujukin, Wanner, why have you become so cold-blooded? I have already told you that I am not dead, why don't you believe me? Mujukin said angrily. Of course I believe he won't die, but you are not him. After Yuan finished speaking, she closed her eyes and struck Mujukin with a palm. Yuan used the power of the stars in this palm, which shows how powerful this palm is. When the palm hit Mujukin, it split him in half with one palm, and his body disappeared instantly. Turned into a white smoke and disappeared into the space. On the ground, Yuan slowly opened her eyes. There were still tears in the corners of her eyes. She waved them on her body and let out a long sigh of relief. With this tribulation, she didn't expect that there will be a tribulation of inner demons. Needless to say, her inner demon is Mujukan. If Mujukan's matter is not resolved, she will appear again next time. Although it is not dangerous, it is sad. A person can be extremely sad and violent. Yuan packed up her things and entered the space to consolidate her cultivation. After consolidating her cultivation, Yuan sat in the training room and was not in a hurry to come out. Instead, the scene of when she was going through the inner demon tribulation kept appearing in her mind. She subconsciously believed that Mujukan was not dead, but why was Mujukan begging her to save him? Is that also her consciousness? Yuan was puzzled. She stood up and walked out of the training room. She was eager to see Mujukan. On Hun Mountain, Mujukan and his son were sitting together and talking. Mujukan's soul has been transformed into an incarnation, but it is still in the state of the soul. After Liang Bao saw her coming, they quietly retreated, leaving Mujukan and her behind. The moment Mujukan saw her, he reached out to hug her. Unfortunately, he was in a state of trance. When he hugged Yuan's body, he passed over her like a wisp of smoke. Mujukan Yuan was very excited when she saw the person she missed so much. She felt sad when she looked at the arms that were about to fall apart from hugging her. Wait for me for a while longer, and I can cultivate into a divine soul body. Mujukan raised his hand to wipe her tears, but thinking of his arms that were about to fall apart, he smiled bitterly and had to sit down cross-legged. Yuan also sat opposite him and looked at him intently. It has been many years, I have thought about him for so many years, and today he appears alive in front of her again. She was glad that everyone left a trace of their souls in the soul cards. She did the right thing when she did so. I just didn't expect that the first person to use the soul would be Mujukan. Yuan took a deep breath. Mujukan, how much of your memory has been restored now? Mujukan shook his head and said, not much, most of them were told to me by my sons. Oh. That doesn't matter, just take your time, as long as you can recover. Yuan comforted her. I know it's not urgent, Wan. I have a feeling that my main soul has not died. The main soul and the split soul should be able to sense it, but they are not in the same space, so we cannot be completely sure. But what Mujukan can be sure of is that his main soul is still there, but the situation is not good. What he told Yuan was to ask her to pay attention in the future. Yuan was stunned. Didn't you die? Mujukan nodded. I have this feeling, but the feeling is not strong since we are not in the same space, but I am sure that the main soul is still there. He's still here. After hearing what Mujukan said, Yuan was not very excited, but instead became worried. This reminded her of the time when she had just overcome the inner demon tribulation. Mujukan kept saying that he was not dead and why he didn't save him. If he is not dead, he must still be in that body, and his condition is very bad now. Yuan said anxiously, then you practice well here, and I'll go out and take a look. Mujukan nodded and said, then you have to be careful. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Yuan reached out to Mujukan and touched an empty space. She reluctantly glanced at Mujukan. She wanted to stay with him here, but what Mujukan said just now cannot be ignored. She had to find the Suzaku ancestor. Yuan returned to Tianxia realm from the realm gate. She did not leave the space immediately. She used the realm gate to look for the Suzaku ancestor, but she came out only after finding no results. I hope to see her appear in the god realm and take the initiative to find her. Now that she is a true god, even though she still fights against the five scum in front of the Suzaku ancestor, no matter what, she still wants to lure him out for confirmation. At this time, the Suzaku ancestor is now in his demon-suppressing tower, so Yuan cannot be found. His condition is not very good now. 10,000 years have passed, and his soul has become weaker instead of stronger, and as soon as he enters Mujukin's body, he cannot control himself. Originally, he thought that after acquiring the red flame divine body, he would be able to roam freely in the world of cultivation, but unexpectedly he would get into trouble. At this time, he looked at Mujukin's body. He couldn't throw it away or use it. It is a pity to destroy it. There is no Suzaku clan in the Wuxia realm now, only Mujukin's red flame body, and he can't change his body even if he wants to. I originally wanted to find the bodies of Mujukin's two sons and use them for the generals. Unfortunately, Yuan and her son seem to have disappeared from the world and have not been seen again for 10,000 years. Ancestor Suzaku frowned, sighed, threw Mujukin's body aside, and continued to meditate. It's very strange that in the past 1,000 years, the soul power of his soul has been inexplicably weakened, and he has to practice it every once in a while. At this time, Mujukin was sitting cross-legged somewhere in the depths of the sea of consciousness on one side. Now that his soul had recovered half of his soul, he was following the exhalation and inhalation of the Suzaku ancestor, absorbing the soul power from him. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 770. Chapter 770, Spell. That's right, Mujukin did not die, but he paid a high price to save his life. It turns out that when the Suzaku ancestor used Nanmingli fire to burn him, he immediately summoned his own Nanmingli fire and let it use its maximum ability to devour these Nanmingli fires. These Nanmingli Wo are simply a great supplement to his Nanmingli Wo, so this is an opportunity not to be missed. Then Mujukin used the soul-splitting technique to immediately split his soul into two. After the soul is separated, he can find an invisible artifact that he refined himself from his space, and then hide it in the deepest part of his sea of consciousness. This artifact was made by him after he was promoted to God Emperor to test his level of weapon refining. It has been useless in the space. Unexpectedly, it will come in handy today. He added a divine crystal to the invisible artifact, which even the Suzaku ancestor didn't notice. And when he split his soul, he also split his memory into two. He didn't want Ancestor Suzaku to get all his memories, let alone Ancestor Suzaku carrying his body to find Wanner and the others. And he believed that the Suzaku ancestor would definitely keep his body. That's why the Suzaku ancestor swallowed the other half of his soul and only had the memories before he arrived in the fairy world. He sealed all the subsequent memories into that half of the soul. The Suzaku patriarch found nothing unusual after devouring the other half of his soul, thinking that his Nanming Liwo had burned him, and there was only so much left. In fact, this is not the case. Mujukin's own Nanming Liwo swallowed up part of the Suzaku ancestor's Nanming Liwo. He himself is a red flame body. How could this Nanming Liwo burn him to death in a short while? While burning him, he also used the Nanmingli fire to refine his body, so the Nanmingli fire did little harm to his body and soul. Moreover, every time Ancestor Suzaku was exercising his kung fu, he would use his own spiritual soul skills to slowly absorb the soul power of Ancestor Suzaku. This could weaken the spirit of Ancestor Suzaku and strengthen himself. Of soul. At the beginning, his soul was divided into two, and the strength of the soul dropped all the way to less than 1/10 of its original strength. Now he has recovered half of it, but he is still not the opponent of the Suzaku ancestor. The look on the face of Ancestor Suzaku just now almost destroyed his body, which really shocked him. Had it not been for the soul spell that he often used in daily life, the enchantment technique, which could slightly affect the consciousness of the Suzaku ancestor, he would have finished playing it long ago. This technique can only confuse the heart but not the soul. Once he tries to confuse the soul of Suzaku ancestor, he will definitely find it. The purpose of confusing his mind is to prevent him from causing trouble to Wanner and the others, and also not to destroy his body. Now, seeing that the Suzaku ancestor was starting to practice again, he felt relieved. He can only figure it out slowly in this way. When he is strong, he will find a way to get out. He also knew that he could not die. There was his soul in Yuan's space, but deep down he thought it was his body and his life, so he had to keep this body and save his life no matter what. On the other hand, Yuan walked around the god realm but failed to lure the Suzaku ancestor out, so she returned to Tiandao sect to see Chu Ling. The little Tuanzi back then is now extremely handsome, and his strength is at the level of the earth god. His cultivation qualifications are really good, so she left some resources for him and then returned to her palace. Tiandao sect was as deserted as ever. She still went to the Sutra Pavilion and continued with the rest. To improve your own strength, never delay and always put yourself first. No one knows which accident or misfortune will come first tomorrow. Only with strength can we have the capital to deal with it. There are a total of 49 floors in the Sutra Pavilion. Going up from the first floor, the area becomes smaller and smaller, and there are fewer things. By the 14th floor, there are only a few hundred jade slips and hundreds of books. And as you go up, these skills and spells become more advanced. Yuan really couldn't stop watching it. She really wanted to finish it in one sitting and become a fat man. The days were spent in such a calm situation, and Yuan also saw the 49th floor in one breath. There were only 2 exercises on it, one was the rubbing of starju, and the other was the spell. Yuan flipped through the Art of Stars a few times, and found it was exactly the same as her book The Art of Stars, so she put it back where it was without reading it. Then he picked up the Book of Spells. The name of the book was Spells. Yuan turned to the first page, and it said that spells are actually a kind of prohibition. Sure enough, when I saw the curse seal before, I thought it was a kind of restriction, and it was true. Yuan continued to turn to the second page, which talked about the requirements for practicing spells. On the third page, I started to draw some simple spells. Yuan did some research and found that the spell was similar to the restraint, with the addition of an additional procedure, which was to use the blood of the caster as an introduction. And the blood must be the essence and blood of the caster. Essence and blood, Yuan now understood why no one practices this spell. There are several drops of essence and blood in a person's body. Even when practicing, he must practice with essence and blood, for fear that the essence and blood will be used up. Maybe even a single spell has not been learned. What kind of evil is this? How can you not learn other magical arts after learning it? This is nonsense. It's true that after learning spells, you don't have the energy to learn other things. If you learn it, you have to keep replenishing your essence and blood, and naturally you won't have time to learn other things. However, Yuan still wants to memorize all the spells. She can practice them selectively when necessary. Having learned it, you can use it against others when necessary. Furthermore, the spell is cast without anyone noticing, and the other party has no idea that he or she has been under a spell unless the spell is triggered. Then Suzaku Patriarch, she has no way to do anything to him, so she can use spells to deal with him. It took Yuan a year to memorize all the spells in this book. The content is not much, but the technical terms are too difficult to understand, so she has to be familiar with them before remembering them. After memorizing it, Yuan K put the spell back and then went down to the Sutra Pavilion. When she returned to her palace, she entered the space training room to digest what she had seen. The jade slips of scriptures and scriptures placed in the Sutra Pavilion are almost all-encompassing. From ancient times to the present, there are countless miscellaneous ones. Yuan could only sort it out slowly. This is a huge project. Yuan organized it into different categories, including exercises, techniques, cultivation of various arts, humanities, and geography, and major and minor events that have occurred in the 5-axis realm from ancient times to the present. Yuan sorted out one and engraved it on the jade slip. In this way, I browsed it again and consolidated it again. I believe that after sorting out all these things, she will be an encyclopedia. End of this chapter.